We had the attribution study. It came out really pretty quickly. And despite the infrastructure in Libya, which was obviously not built for this kind of disaster, they're very definite that climate change, global surface warming is yet again behind these two catastrophes. Both Libya and Greece, this is a catastrophic event in different kind of ways.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Climate Emergency Forum. We've got broken dams and wastelands on tap today. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I really, really wish that we would stop having climate news to report to you, but it doesn't seem to be the case. It just keeps accelerating. Things keep happening. Well, what do we have now? We have an incredible disaster in Libya. Of course, we heard by now about the dam situation there and how the infrastructure wasn't quite what it should be and how whistleblowers are coming out about that. This could very well be true. Let's wait for the news to come out, but don't be fooled. This would not have happened if not for the incredible, incredible deluge that hit Libya with such incredible force. One wonders, it would have been a disaster. Of course, it was compounded. So many of these things happen. We talk about mitigation and adaptation. This is certainly a case of where adaptation has failed to meet the mark. Listen, we have nothing in front of us but one climate catastrophe after the other. And if we do not shore up the infrastructure of our major cities of the world, we are in a heap of trouble. I know there have been many, many deaths reported, and Peter and Paul are going to also speak to you about Greece. But what has me so terribly distraught, it's not just the loss of human life. Of course, we have to put that first. It's the loss of many, many, many different lives. And it's not just the most obvious lives that will be lost. So much was washed out to the sea in Libya. Do we really think that cars filled with gasoline, antifreeze, I don't know if they have that in Libya, windshield washer fluid, the different types of cleaning agents that are found in stores and homes, do we really think that those things being washed out to sea are safe for the living beings who call the seas their home? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So we have this incredible disaster, the disaster of Libya, the disaster of the loss of life, human and non-human on land. And then, of course, the horrible catastrophe that is befalling our seas, our oceans, our waterways, when we continually dump candy wrappers, potato chip bags, plastic this, that, and the other, cleaning agents and gasoline into the oceans and our seas. It does not bode well. So I hate to bring us to such a dramatic entry, but I don't know what else to do because this is what is happening. I'm going to turn it over to Peter, who is going to further elaborate on the situation that we have at hand today. Peter, what do you have for us?
We had the attribution study. It came out really pretty quickly. And despite the infrastructure in Libya, which was obviously not built for this kind of disaster, they're very definite that climate change, global surface warming is yet again behind these two catastrophes. And both Libya and Greece, this is a catastrophic event in different kind of ways. Yeah, we saw how the dams burst and this wall of water right? Washed right through the villages, but particularly, you know, this coastal city, which was virtually washed out to sea. The latest number that I get is about 4,000 people confirmed to have been killed by this catastrophe, and 9,000 still missing. I mean, this is a huge, huge number of people, families wiped out in one event, which basically was one day's rainfall. Greece, however, you know, when I got to being able to look at the Maxar and drone footage, oh my God, I mean, absolute devastation. And the media commented that the what they call the breadbasket of Greece, one of the main agricultural regions, has really, really been. They're going to. It will take years and years for that food producing region to get over this kind of thing, right? Animals drowned, killed. I mean, absolutely horrendous. These poor, poor people, right? Bang, out of the blue, this seems to have come. But of course, it's not out of the blue at all, because not only is the world economy keeping emissions not reducing, you know, IPCC says emissions should have been declining by now. Well, emissions are still increasing, right? And so this is what we get over and over and over again. So the Libya catastrophe, 50 times more likely and 50% more intense. Wow. Greece, 10 times more likely and 40% more intense. Now, those are the numbers, but you know, it occurred to me that in the media reports, in both cases, nobody in their own lifetime or memory could remember anything like this happening in both cases. Now, of course, Greece was the IPCC has been warning us about compound extreme weather events. So there's poor Greece. It goes through all these fires that seem to last forever, and then bang, they get this deluge from Storm Daniel. I was also interested because we've heard a lot about, of course, the unprecedented marine heat waves and sea surface temperature. And I found that there was a pretty significant and interesting factor here with regards to the Mediterranean Sea. So, of course, Europe as a whole went through its hottest summer ever by a long, long way. But the Mediterranean, right through the summer, of course, was in a marine heat wave. Now, towards the end of August, that heat wave was dissipating. But you know what it was doing? It left the west and the central Mediterranean, but at the time of this catastrophe with Storm Daniel, the eastern Mediterranean, right between Greece and Libya, was still hot, and the numbers on the Mediterranean heat wave, you know, 2, 3 degrees C above average. I mean, those are huge numbers too. So you've got to think, as we've been seeing over and over, that the sea surface temperature heat would have boosted Storm Daniel, which was a mighty unusual storm, unusual time, and unusual severity. And then, of course, you know, there's the money. The government in Greece says it's going to take billions to recover from that, in Greece alone. And Libya, I have no idea, although I've heard that the government has budgeted something like 500 million already. And these are going to be repeated, and they're going to get worse and worse and worse. We have to connect the dots between our fossil fuel emissions, how the food that we eat, and what's happening to the world around us. So it's a tragic, tragic situation, but we know the cause. The cause is primarily burning fossil fuels.
It's definitely burning fossil fuels. And thank you so much, Peter, for bringing up also the food we eat. Though that is not a large contributor as fossil fuel, it still is a factor that we as individuals can control. We can't control the fossil fuel industry. Of course, the politicians could do something, but they've been bought and paid for. But of course, our diet is something that's within our means to control. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. And thank you for expounding upon the situation in Greece. And I would like to hear, Paul, what are your thoughts on this terrible, terrible situation?
Yeah, we have to remember that governments around the world are still subsidizing fossil fuel companies to ever record amounts. After COVID struck and subsidies dropped a bit, we thought maybe there was an opportunity to transition more quickly into renewables, et cetera. But I think in the past year, it's been something like $7.1 trillion going into fossil fuels. And there was an interesting study recently that showed that, we can actually make estimates of future deaths, and for every 1,000 tons of CO2 emitted, that can be attributed to one future death, either a person, either a grandkid or a kid, or even somebody not born yet. So if we put things like that into the framing of the climate problem, when a new coal plant is built, we can say that this is going to cause so many thousands or tens of thousands of deaths. So, Libya, basically the climate, this is all about what abrupt climate change is. The changes are so rapid, the changes are so hard hitting. I've talked forever about the Arctic warming, slowing the jet streams, making them wavier, increasing the frequency, severity, and duration of extreme weather events. But the extreme weather events are also occurring in places they didn't before. So with Storm Daniel and the configuration of the jet streams being sort of a trough over, Southern Europe, Greece and the Mediterranean, Greece got hammered, of course. And, large parts, as Peter was saying, of agriculture was wiped out. And then that storm crossed a very, very warm Mediterranean and didn't weaken, didn't dissipate. And then it dumped all this rain, of course, inland in Libya, which found its way into the river basins, overtook dams, which had not been designed for anything like that. Don't forget, that's a desert country. And then basically, the power of water is enormous. So as Peter said, essentially a tidal wave came down the river valleys, took out the two dams, and washed out a good chunk of that city into the ocean. And there's basically there wasn't really advanced warning. The meteorologists there, they don't cover things. We take meteorologists here in the West for granted. We take forecasts for granted, but they're it's hot and sunny all the time. How many meteorologists you need to say that? So they don't really, also lots of people in lots of countries that don't understand, people that need to understand, climatologists and meteorologists in other countries, they need to understand that the weather system is different. The idea of stationarity or stability is no longer there. And the infrastructure that we have built in the past, it's aging. And if it's not looked at very carefully from a risk point of view, then these events are going to continue to happen. We can argue, well, Libya, went through the war, not enough money to repair infrastructure, corruption in governments, et cetera. But I would argue that, this could happen to anybody, really. With the amount of rain that's being dumped on the land from some of these extreme torrential rain events is just out of our understanding. It's far beyond anything that we've ever had in the past. So as a result, when we get these events, they cascade into further things like dam failure. The Greece fields being covered, that cascades into collapse of agriculture in that region and rising food prices and higher inflation. All of these things are factored in, but at least there's one group of people in Libya that should be very happy with this event, and that is all the economists, because the GDP of that country will rise significantly, as they try to repair all the damage. And the way that economists calculate GDP, which they base a lot of their policies and their recommendations to governments on, that increases significantly when there's a natural disaster. So our society just has no idea really what is coming down the pipe. People tell me all the time, well, we know climate change is bad. We know things are going to get worse, but people have no idea that, in our climate casino, there's huge risks. There's going to be huge problems, and we're going to run out of money to rebuild this stuff. right? We're just, I mean, you know, I guess governments can keep printing more and more money to rebuild things, but the idea of growth, growth, growth all the time, that paradigm is crazy, and it's killing, it's destroying our planet, and it's killing us in larger and larger numbers.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for bringing up this whole notion of, and it's true, that disasters are good for the economy. Gets people back to work, right? Gets people buying things. It's a terrible, terrible way that we view this world, because, you know, they call these the costs, these externalities, the fact that all this crap is now floating, and the beautiful bodies of water that should be pristine were it not for us. There are parts of Greece where people are not able to drink water, so they're encouraged to purchase bottled water. Well, what do you get when you purchase bottled water? More plastic. Where does the plastic go? In the oceans. How does that affect people? Well, not people. How does that affect those who live in the oceans? Poorly. How many whales and dolphins have to wash up in Thailand dead, completely full of plastic, before we change our ways? I guess, honestly, I guess it just doesn't matter, is what it means. You know, we haven't even touched on the health implications. There are a lot of health implications. As I mentioned, lack of drinking water. And as Peter mentioned, the long-term effects of not having enough food. And I'm wondering, Peter, if you wanted to maybe elaborate on potential health implications, if you wanted to focus more on what it means for food supply. I would like to hear your thoughts.
These increasing in frequency, and even more so increasing in intensity, severity, these events. You know, the governments everywhere seem to be very slow to responding to these. The humanitarian organizations, the NGOs are there, but it takes days and days and days for an emergency response, and that clearly has to change. And the big factor underneath all this, and I totally agree with you, Regina, and Paul indicated this, we're not appreciating, you know, the situation that we're in. Not at all. Yeah, maybe it's normal to, you know, to have psychological denial of this, but we got to get on it, and we got to get on it really, really fast. We talk a lot about adaptation, and we should be talking a lot about adaptation, but I don't think we're focusing on really what's needed with adaptation. So number one, a huge amount of resources and money has to be rapidly available for when these catastrophes, because they are catastrophes when they hit. Now, the other thing which we have to do everywhere, developed and developing countries, is all of the public health services have to be rapidly upgraded, right? So that we have the capacity to respond to deaths, near-death injuries, contamination of water, lack of food, contaminated food. So we have to put ourselves into a cooperative world situation in which we upgrade our capacity for everything. And we're not going to do that until we, as a society, as a world, we recognize how bad, how terrible this is, and how much terribly worse it's going to get. I really appreciate Paul focusing on the economics. That's so, so important. So thank you for that, Paul. Every one of these things is a wake-up call, according to the media and according to the scientists, but we still have not woken up.
No, we haven't woken up, Peter. What we're doing as a society, as a world, is something that I kind of do fairly often, and that is hit the snooze alarm. I hit the snooze, I hit the snooze, I hear the alarm, but you know what? It's just so comfortable. I don't want to change. I don't want to get up. I want to just stay with what I know, this warm, cozy bed. And you know what inevitably happens is I finally get up and I'm like, oh my God, I'm late. I'm running out the door. The bus is gone. The subway's late. I can't find my pass to the office. It's never good. So this is what happens. We keep hitting the snooze, and one day, soon enough, it's going to hit us in the butt, And as we've all said, it's going to hit us hard. I hate to put it that way, people, but it's just the truth. Paul, I'd like to have you close us out with some more of your insights on what all of this means.
Thank you, Regina and Peter. So I think the realization that nobody is living in a place that is immune to being affected by abrupt climate change. And every different location has different threats, and they all need to be reevaluated from ground one. Start with a blank sheet of paper and start looking at where you live. Is there a river close by? Is it hilly terrain? You know, you're going to get landslides with torrential rains. You know, in a place like Libya, you know, what happens if you get inundated with rainfall? You know, any coastal city can be affected. I mean, people think until something happens to them, they think, oh, it's never going to happen to me. They, you know, hit the snooze button, as you say, and, you know, then there's some catastrophe, never happened before. Everybody throws up their hands, and, you know, governments just scramble to rebuild, and media tries to downplay the impact of climate change on this event and say, oh, this is just a freak disaster or whatever. So I'll give an example close to home in Canada with a torrential rain event. So about a year ago, we had Hurricane Fiona come up through the Maritimes and cause lots of damage. And this year we had Tropical Storm Lee, a massive storm just came up into the Maritimes. And probably most Canadians have no idea that, you know, what are the failure paths of these storms. And the key failure is that near Amherst, Nova Scotia, the connection, the border between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia is a very narrow strip of land, and it's below sea level, according to the mayor of Amherst. And there's earthen dams that have been there forever, and it's basically marshland. So as you drive through the Trans-Canada Highway into Nova Scotia, or as you take a rail in there, or the power lines go all in that corridor. And the mayor was saying on CBC News, Canada's national broadcaster, that they dodged a bullet with Fiona. And they also, this was before Lee hit, and they also dodged a bullet with Lee, because what could happen is a hit from Fiona or Lee could take out those earthen dams and flood this vast area connecting New Brunswick to Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia essentially becomes an island and could be closed down, that connection, that, you know, so basically in Nova Scotia, people would have about 5 days of food. They'd have to start bringing, and they would lose power for long periods of time, and there'd be no rail or road transport. Yeah, how many people have even heard of this, right? I mean, the mayor of Amherst is aware of it. If there's a failure from climate change, a hydrological event, a huge storm, then this is going to be disruptive to the entire maritime region of Canada. And yet nobody talks about it, nobody's heard about it, and until it actually happens, you know, people won't think about it. So our whole idea, we've done shows on risk analysis. How do we analyze risk? And we have it completely and utterly wrong, right? We need to, each place, each city, each group of people on the planet needs to sit down and look at what hazards there are for their region, whether it be, you know, heat waves or sea level rise. I mean, there's just a report from this huge glacier in Antarctica, you know, Pine Island Glacier. It's cracking all at the edges. It seems to be, right? We could have 40 to 80 centimeters of sea level rise within a few years if one of these major glaciers goes. And then we're not talking about one coastal city. We're talking about cities around the world. Okay, so we don't seem to have the capability to put our thinking out there further to try to anticipate what catastrophes can befall us. And, you know, all of these things are happening around the world. I mean, we've talked about Greece and Libya, but there's been flooding all over the world. There's been bad flooding in China, in Japan. There's flooding in Spain. There's flooding everywhere. I mean, the number of disasters is ramping way up exponentially, it seems. And, we need to sit back as a global community and say, what the heck are we going to do about it? And we can't just have these discussions that talking about what we do about it being hijacked by fossil fuel industry people. Our planet is screaming to us. So these disasters are just going to happen over and over and over. So it's going to bankrupt countries. It's going to cause governments to fall. This is just the logical progression of where things are going. It's going to make immigration around the world crazy, right? I mean, just last week, there were about 8,000 people from Africa that went to an island off Italy. And, they might set up a tent city there, but there's backlash. Residents in that small island don't want all these people sticking around forever, right? So eventually countries, I think, will just shut their borders to immigrants and say everybody for themselves. And, it's going to be a very harsh world. And this is where we're heading because of abrupt climate change.
Thank you so much for everything that you said. And thank you for bringing up how we are going to become much more harsh as a species, as if that's even possible, by the way. But yes, we are going to see climate refugees that are not wanted. Walls are going to be erected ever higher as these catastrophes compound. It will change everything. We have floods and fires, oh my, folks, and it's not a joke. We don't necessarily have an answer, but we do have ways of helping to bring these important topics to the fore. Because if we don't have information, if we don't have knowledge, then we have nothing. And so at least our hope is that these videos are helpful to you, that it helped to educate you somewhat on the topic at hand, flooding, fires. We will continue to report on these climate catastrophes and their causes. And we hope that you will continue to join us no matter how difficult these conversations are. They are needed conversations. We hope that you continue to tune in, that you share these videos with everyone that you know, that you also make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. It may seem silly, but you know what? It really helps us with the algorithm. We want to make sure that these videos get seen by as many people as possible. So we want to thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time at the Climate Emergency Forum.